Welcome everyone to Tech Talk. And Tech Talk Friday, we talk technology, we talk tech that matters, and talk that counts. And at the heart of it today, lots of stuff happening in the tech world. Nvidia just got valued at the even higher than Microsoft, right? The most valued organization in the world. We can talk a little bit about Nvidia in a bit. But today we've got a very special guest with us, Tareef Jafferi from Happily. And Tareef, welcome to the show. Really glad to have you with us today, and it's an honor. Maybe you can share a little bit about your background and how you got into the tech space, but
Yeah.
fundamentally, ultimately getting very deep into the analytics and also the people, the tech people space, right? Or HR tech, if I'm too accurate. Go ahead, Tarif.
Thanks, Roshan. The honor is mine, of course. So thanks for having me. A bit about myself. I studied material science and engineering, so really nothing to do with what I'm doing right now. But I think if I were to connect the dots, studying materials was all about like trying to understand the building blocks, so that we can create new materials. I think today I'm trying to understand the building blocks of people relationships so that we can create new types of organizations. So I think there is that an analogy there to be made at a stretch. But yes, I've always been interested in the fundamentals of how do you create an organization, because organization is a group of people that come together towards a shared purpose. We could either be a group of freelancers who have different objectives, just trying to get tasks done. But there is something special that happens when it's more than just tasks, but how the tasks are executed and the relationships that happen between the people. I think that always fascinated me. But a lot of times in that kind of social science research, without data, it's just a lot of intuition. It's a lot of observation and trying to make decisions based on observation. And then I came across people analytics, which is about taking data about people in the workplace. And that brought a lot more clarity to the factors that end up creating these really good outcomes. And I think that's kind of been my trajectory
And
on what
and,
I'm
and
doing.
and you spent time in Google a number of years there, and then and also you kind of did your studies at MIT. How did those influence the fact that today, and we'll talk a little bit about Happily, the app that you've developed. How did that sort of influence you to get to this point of developing Happily?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, my time at Google was relatively brief, but it was very formative. I'll be very honest. Like I did when I was pre-Google, I did a lot of research and reading on the idea of culture, but I never really understood how important it really was. And I was trying
Mm,
to almost fake it until you make it kind of thing. But when the moment I walked into Google, and this is about 10 or so years ago, it was the first time in my life that I actually felt what culture feels like, and it was an awakening period for me. That it wasn't about all these benefits and stuff that people often talk about, but about the relationships between people that I've never had before in the workplace. My relationship that I had with my manager was something else, but it had to do with the practices that they put in place around people. And so is this idea that actually you can replicate that kind of culture. It's not expensive. It just has to do with people and management practices. Then my time at Google was spent doing research around this area as well. So I kind of married these two perspectives together, saying, "Hey, this is really possible." I came back to Thailand because I'm from here, and then went back to a workplace that didn't have that anymore. It didn't have this outstanding culture, and so I had a thesis about 7 years ago that can we turn any workplace to what it felt like when I was there at Google for just a bit, because I really thought it was possible. And then ever since then, it's been using and applying technology. And I think AI has been a very big turning point for us as well. That so much around turning data into actual insights can get lost just when you share data with people and then people deciding what to do with it. And so AI has been very pivotal in reducing the gap there, that we can go from data to action very, very quickly. And I think that those are the things that really define the practices that we have in the workplace. How quickly can you go from knowing something and doing something about it on a micro level?
And you've been sort of leveraging AI for a long time. I know in the last, I guess, when 2022, when ChatGPT came out, and AI now became sort of a trend and a buzzword, that every talks about AI, and every single product seems to have AI embedded in it, regardless of some. I've noticed even some products that like 10 years ago, like, oh, we are AI powered now,
Yeah,
and so on and so forth. But you really have been using AI, and I think Google AI was kind of part of your platform for many years, and this is probably 8-9 years ago when you first started Happily. You've
yeah,
already embedded the whole concept of how to use AI to
yeah,
enable managers to know their employees better, and to be able to react, and to be able to drive changes or positive reinforcements for employees.
right.
Talk us through that, and how you've sort of built upon it, and where you are today in terms of the usage of AI in your own products and services.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think there's there are products that are natively built with AI. So from the very beginning, the infrastructure is built with AI in mind, the capabilities of that kind of technology, versus products that have AI add-ons. The core product is something, but then let's add on AI to make something maybe better, more effective, etc. We had always been a native AI company, but the nature of how we apply AI has changed drastically. At the very beginning, we were just training models to predict things. Can we help predict turnover, for example, so that we can proactively resolve that problem? Can we predict events from happening, and so that we can be more proactive about our actions? And then we deliver those insights to managers so that they can be more effective in managing and supporting their teams. Now with the LLMs at where they are, we can start using generative AI to do so much more than just predicting things. We can start improving people interactions. Right? When people are giving feedback, our AI is able to, in real time, tell them how are they sounding. Are they sounding passive aggressive? How can they sound more empathetic? So we're actually able to improve the quality of communication in real time, which in effect is what creates great culture and great leadership in the first place. So I think that's been our evolution, is that it's always been AI because we understood the implications of that technology, but the applications of AI has expanded just because it's now so much more accessible, and the capabilities have also multiplied drastically over the past few years.
Great. And let's talk a little bit about your product, Happily.ai, and the whole app. Talk us through that. I mean, and we sort of understand the genesis, right? Your time in Google, in terms of struggling with culture, and how do we create something sustainable over long terms. And then you talked a little bit about the understanding, the whole people analytics and the data analytics piece that you've went through. How did that all morph into this product called Happily?
I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, and to be very honest, there is a very selfish reason why I created Happily, is because I was leading a team, and I'm an extreme introvert. And the idea of checking in with my team every day, I knew how important that was because that's what I got at Google. And it really changed how I felt about work and how I interacted with people. So I knew that was really important. But at the same time, I didn't have the capabilities to do that because it took too much out of me. So the inception was just like, okay, can I create a tool just to make this easier for me? I didn't want to take the human out of it. I don't think we should ever do that. But I wanted to have a way so that I could be a more proficient or a more effective manager for my team. And that's kind of been the starting point. It was a very small tool that I just built in to improve my workflow. And then I saw how valuable it was for me as a manager. I got to see things I never saw before. People were sharing things with me that I was bringing into my work. And then I'm like, okay, there's definitely something here. And so from there on, that's when we explored more about what we could do with this kind of tool. And so it wasn't really built with the whole like HR tech landscape in mind. It was more as a manager slash a leader, what can we do to improve people outcomes within the workplace? And the outcomes that we really cared about were things around happiness and well-being, as well as productivity and effectiveness. And a lot of times we think one sacrifices the other. If we want performance, we have to sacrifice well-being, and realize that doesn't have to be the case. And that the things that are getting in the way is more about how we handle the interactions in between, right? And so that was the inception for Happily. And then the more data we were able to get around people, that again, the ethics around how we gather data is really important. So we're getting data that people are volunteering because they understand the value that they're getting out of the interactions. And from there, we're able to do a lot of things. We're able to help them see things that they could not see before, recognize patterns in their own behavior or how they're impacting other people. Because it's not only about pointing out the things you could improve at, it's also pointing out the strengths that you've never saw in yourself, right? That's my favorite part of Happily, is helping me, it's recognizing the things that make me unique as a person and making me double down on those things, right? While also making me better for the people around me. So I think that's been the core philosophy around Happily, is we're not really trying to automate a certain workflow within performance management or anything like that. Yes, we do stuff like that, but at the core, it's really about people outcomes and organizational outcomes. And then we're on that mission, and we're continuing on that today.
And one of the things, you talked a little bit about, happiness and looking at a couple of different dimensions, and you actually look at it in, if I'm not mistaken, 12 different, or is it 10, 11 different dimensions, right?
Right.
When you look at Happily, talk us through that. I mean, and why are these important? And maybe I can sort of show this on screen. Also, I mean, I think these are some of the dimensions you look at: happiness, relationship manager, feedback, introspection, and so on and so forth. Maybe talk us through this a little bit.
Sure. So, so much of the work that we do, and I dare say all of the work we do, is very fundamentally based on research. And we were looking at research to understand what are the key drivers of a successful organization and a successful individual. And we realized that there's so many things that go into an engaged employee, that these factors, just imagine that if you have everything figured out, but the relationship with manager is broken, you get a disengaged employee. You could get everything right, but you could get only one of these things wrong. You already have a broken part of your system. And so we wanted to make sure that, hey, we have to be able to understand this and take care of all these components at the same time. And it's very, very hard and unreasonable to expect a manager to be able to cover all of these aspects by themselves, right? So how Happily works is we ask questions to uncover if there are challenges in any of these dimensions. Most of the time there isn't. Most of the time everything is green. But in the moment where something becomes yellow or red, right? Wellness decreases, personal growth is now lacking, we could do something about it right away. Not at some annual engagement survey when it's too late, not at some performance review that's biased by people being afraid of actually voicing how they really feel because they fear it will affect how they'll get promoted or evaluated. There needs to be a better way to understand these things. So yeah, that's kind of been how we've built the product, and the dimensions are related to that. Is understanding fundamentally what are the core factors that drive these outcomes and making sure that we can take care of them in real time.
And so you have questions, or you have basically stuff that is pushed out to different employees, and that gives you just in time understanding of the employee situation, right?
That's right. And questions are extremely powerful. We use them in every part of our human interactions, whether we're building personal relationships, whether we're building professional relationships. You think about how therapy or coaching works, it's just a bunch of questions that are asked to help you reflect on the right things. So I think that's also been a really big part of the people science behind Happily, is asking good questions help you track things. Asking great questions helps you change things. And it's not easy to understand the difference or to realize the difference between good and great. So a lot of our work goes into these things. Yeah, taking the research and understanding what are the key things we have to look for. And things we uncover are really unexpected sometimes. The most surprising thing in the early stages of working on Happily was, for example, we measure happiness every day. We ask, how are you feeling today? And people are responding on a scale. And then on a quarterly basis, we were asking questions around well-being. We use the WHO5, the World Health Organization's WHO5 index. So we're also understanding both happiness at a real-time level versus well-being on a quarterly level. And the surprising thing is that they don't correlate. That you would expect a person with high happiness to also have high well-being, but that's not the case. It shows to our human resilience that we can be happy even when we're not doing well, right? And vice versa. And so that already is a flaw, that if we only measure happiness alone, we're not really understanding what's really going on. A person can be struggling with their well-being, and well-being affects our capacity for empathy, for taking on new challenges, etc. When people get overwhelmed very quickly, and we're like, wait, this doesn't seem like a lot of work. If they're critical in well-being, it is a lot of work for them, right? And so things like that, the data layer helps us understand ourselves better and also our organizations better. And I think that's kind of been what we've been trying to do, from all the longitudinal data that we have, is to be able to uncover these aspects of the workplace.
Fantastic, fantastic. And talk us through. I mean, how has it been? In terms of now that you've developed this, and this is a couple of years, right? About 8 years now. You've had
Yeah.
this product. How has it been in terms of the outcomes and the impacts that you were thinking about, and what has actually transpired? Or has it been as you imagine, or I suspect there's probably interesting insights that have percolated from preliminary. And I'm assuming a lot of organizations that have taken Happily and have used it. What are some of the benefits, or what are some of the sort of reactions that have happened in terms of leveraging it?
We're very data driven, so all our outcomes are measured, right? So things like employee satisfaction measured by eNPS. We are looking at how well just by using Happily, can we improve how satisfied people are at work? And the fact that we could improve employee satisfaction by over 48 points within 3 months is unprecedented,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
Most of the time, people go in and say, okay, I want to improve my eNPS by 5 or 10 points this year. We're doing we're doing 5x of that in a short amount of time. And that was really eye-opening for me, because I realized that when we are focusing on these small actions that happen every day, they do compound into really big results, right? And sometimes when we want to create big change within organizations, we think we need big gestures. We need a big event. We need to travel and do a company offsite, and that's going to change how people feel about work. But the truth is that when they go back to work the next day after their company offsite, they go back to the same things. And so what matters more is what is happening in those individual moments that they have. The people interactions they have every day are a much better indicator of things like employee satisfaction. So those are the outcomes that we continue to try to improve on. The things that we found to be hardest to move are things like employee well-being. Well-being doesn't change overnight. It's something that we have to really work at. And if there are organizational aspects that are causing low well-being, we should definitely fix that, right? Are there toxic behaviors in the workplace? We could use data, for example, to identify sources of toxic behavior. Hey, there's something happening in this part of the org, because this part of the org, there's a lot of reports of toxic. We don't know who exactly it is, and that's not the point of Happily. We're not trying to point fingers. We're trying to help understand the problem using as much clarity and data as possible. And that a lot of times we're able to solve problems better that way. We find that in more traditional approaches, it's been a lot of finger pointing and blaming. Hey, you are the problem. You better fix yourself. Whereas, hey, we seem to have a problem here. Can we work together to solve this? There's something that we can't explain right now. How can we then understand this better? What are the type of conversations we should be having? So we're really trying to change fundamentally the practices that we have in building relationships that employees have with their organizations and within the people within the organizations as well.
And many times when you drive Happily, I mean, part of and we use Happily in our organization too, right? So part of I think the big, at least for me, it's being able to get insights on what's happening in your teams, being able to react very quickly in almost just in time. I mean, on a daily basis, you kind of know, if there's risks in there and so on. Talk us through that a little bit. I mean, how do you help managers to be better managers by these insights?
The insights are my favorite part of Happily. So like as a manager, you on a daily level, you get like very quick insights about how your teams are doing, right? Are they okay? Are they not okay in a certain area? And the AI is translating a lot of the data points into real action. It's telling me, hey, Reef, for this person this week, you should focus on this, right? And then I don't have to guess anymore. And it's telling me things that even as a person who's led teams for a very, very long time, is telling me things I've never noticed. And so that really helps. And I think that from the other side of the table, the thing that's really game changing about it is that a person feels very different when they're proactively helped rather than when they're reactively helped. Like if I ask you for help, Roshan, I asked you for it and I took some effort to do so. But if you somehow knew what I needed before I told you and you came
Yep.
to help me, that's a completely different thing, right?
Right.
That talks about the level of empathy that there is within that relationship for you to
Mm.
understand what I'm going through and be able to help me proactively. So I think that's really the power of the insight that we can drive, is that we can help managers proactively help their teams and realize that maybe 90% of what they're doing isn't really that productive anyway.
Mm.
Right? All these
Mm.
one-on-ones and all these things that we're doing feel like busy work, and it takes a lot out of managers. But what if we knew we were more precise about it? We are saving managers a lot of time from doing the things they're not supposed to be doing. So yeah, those are the things that we, of course, keep developing on. But that's the really exciting part about how AI helps here, is that
Yeah.
before 7 years ago, it was just a bunch of like data points on a table that we were sharing. Today, it's natural language. We're explaining it in words about what needs to be done and how. And it does help reduce the amount of cognitive effort it takes to manage a team well.
Yeah, no, I find, I think that's one piece that's very powerful as managers, because and it's the just in time nature, right? Because I mean, usually we have HR business partners coming and saying, hey, last week I spoke to this guy and seems like some problems, but then when you talk to the person, it's like, oh, that was last week. This week's fine,
Yeah,
always sorted and so on. And it's like, after a while, you're like, I'm not going to bother, so much, because it's very reactive to past data.
yeah,
But I think this can be very proactive towards future, and also sometimes, I personally had where I think one of my employees were going to leave and happily triggered me and said, hey, this person might be leaving, and we had this conversation, and we managed to salvage that whole thing. I think another piece that I find relatively interesting is the village. And maybe you can talk us through that, especially at least in my organization, at Datanomics, one of the things that everyone loves is the running track, right? Where it's an extremely competitive sort of environment. Maybe you can talk through that, and what were you thinking when you architect the running track, the housing, the town hall, and so on, and especially today with hybrid working styles, right? I think this is a powerful it's something very powerful in sort of the hybrid
yeah.
working space, right?
Yeah. What was I thinking, right? So yeah, I think fundamentally we were looking at the research is clear that people with the strongest relationships in the workplace are most effective. If I have strong relationships, when I have a problem with something, I know exactly who to go to, and they'll help me fix it. If I don't have those pre-existing relationships, one, I don't even know who to go to. And even if I knew who to go to, I don't have a relationship to ask them for help. So that's why it's very clear why people with strong relationships are really effective within the workplace. And so we're trying to find a way, how do we help people build informal networks within the organization? Because a relationship is an investment. You have to form them before you can leverage
Mm,
them for useful things,
right.
right? And so things like the running track are a really good way to get people who never interacted with one another to start doing so. And when we have houses, which is like in Harry Potter, where houses represent certain personalities, for us, it's about work styles. And so that brings another level of shared belonging, that hey, these are a group of people who work kind of similar to me, and then now I compete with them against others in a way that's friendly. It's non-invasive. It doesn't take a lot of time, but again, small actions compounded over time make a very big difference. And I
Mm.
personally have gotten to know people in a different way, in a different light, through these interactions. Oh, I never knew this person was like this. And those are the things that we get to do to form better and stronger relationships at work.
I want to just time's running. I mean, it's always good having conversation. Time just flies. But one piece that I think we didn't talk so much is about recognition, right? And I think the data is very clear, and maybe you can talk us through recognition a little bit, and that's a
Yeah,
big element of how you build happily, right? Is the
yeah,
importance of recognition, both
yeah,
to the individual and also to collectively for a team, right?
yeah.
And that's a big part of happily, right?
It is, because recognition is a tool that we use to enable someone to feel valued at work. It's very hard to feel valued when you're not recognized for the things that you're doing. So I think that's one fundamental thing. We know how important feeling valued at work is. Recognition is the best instrument to do so, but there's many different ways to use the instrument. The blunt instrument is recognize people for anything. A very sharp instrument is how about we recognize others that in a way that's aligned to our core values. Because in that case, you're using, as leaders, we're using recognition to reinforce our values. These are the things that matter here. These are the things that we recognize and reward. So you want to build a system where one, people feel valued, but two, for the right things as well. That getting recognition because I bought someone snacks yesterday for after lunch is one thing, but recognizing me for doing excellent work because excellence is a core value and giving me a clear example of what that is makes me do excellence more often and makes other people do excellence more often as well. So I think recognition definitely has different aspects to it, and we want to be very sharp about how this is done. And we've gamified it as well to make it interesting and fun so that people can give recognition to each other in a more free way. And I think that's something that we have to combat here as well. I'm not sure about Malaysia, but for example, in Thailand, it's not a social norm to recognize other people, right? So there is a social norm that works against that it's not a natural tendency for people to recognize their peers. So, but when we gamify it, we're creating a different norm, that there is this fun element, giving element. There is like generosity in the culture that we have here. So now it feels like, oh, I'm being generous by recognizing someone, and then we can make that happen. So I think that we're also leveraging cultural nuances so that things that were supposed to happen but did not can happen because we were changing the mechanics of it a bit.
Wow. And so I mean, as a sort of a, as we wrap this up, and what sort of advice would you embed to business leaders? I mean, I mean, a lot of them spend a lot of time, I guess, on market intelligence. Are trying to understand competitors, trying to understand your customer, and so on. I think in your space, it's really about people intelligence, right? Your employees, the capability, the capacity, and the ability. What sort of advice would you impart, as they struggle between, more focused, I guess, on outside or the external versus internal?
Yeah, I mean, since this is also a tech talk, I think I very much want to advocate for how AI is applied within workplaces today. I think the gut reaction when we see AI is that, okay, what can we automate here? And in automation, more often than not, is about reducing the amount of people that you have. Okay, there used to be 5 people on this team. We could automate a few things, so now there's only 2 people left. And then if we view the world that way, it is a very much about subtractive and additive, right? What can we add so that we can subtract? And I think the real power of AI is not in adding and subtracting, but in multiplying. And multiplying happens when you take what you have and enhance it, make it better. And so there are AI tools out there that aren't around automating alone, but are about taking a person that you already have and just making them 5 or 10 times better than how they, in their capabilities in the workplace. Happily is trying to do that within the context of managing people, because we know how difficult managing people can be and what the multiplication effects are of having great managers versus mediocre ones. So that's the mission that we're on. But then just like looking more at what other things can we do so that the team that we have we can elevate them all at once using a technology that is really driving a lot of change today.
Think I muted myself. HR leaders are funded. HR leaders, as we're talking about, HR leaders fundamentally, some are very averse to technology, to change, and what you are proposing here can be quite threatening, right? I mean, part of it is it is to simplify their roles, to give them a lot more ability to understand the employees, but at the same time, it may feel like you're taking away from especially like HR business partners and so on, where it's really about connecting with employees. So what kind of advice would you sort of provide or input to them, as they explore technology, as they explore putting their hands and getting their feet sort of wet in this whole HR technology space. And we understand the outcome, right? I mean, the outcome is a far better outcome for them in terms of
Yeah.
taking the organization further. But what sort of advice would you impart to them as they sort of step into the space of a little bit maybe with trepidation?
And I feel for HR especially during this time because they're asked to change in so many different ways. But HR is currently a very operationally heavy role. Everybody wants HR to be more strategic without giving them any time or space to be strategic at all. So I think yes, AI can be used to automate a lot of things to reduce the operational burden. But I think when we become more strategic HR, we will need to use data and leverage data to make better decisions. Quality people decisions matter a lot. People decisions are not reversible. If I make an error in my code, I could press Control Z and start again. If I make an error in how I interact with another person in the workplace, I cannot Control Z that, right? So I think it's that, yeah, it can be really, one, prioritization can be a problem, but then hopefully I think our happily customers and the HR teams that we work with can advocate this the best, is that we're helping so that instead of having to recruit new people all the time, you could just retain the ones you have, and that's a much better game to play. But when we're always chasing things because of systems that we have embedded, I think that's when, that's when, just I guess encouraging to maybe rethink that a bit. So that maybe we could use AI to help us improve the strategic elements of our work, and that it's not very hard to do. It's that it doesn't take 6 months or a year. It takes 2 weeks to get up and running, and and then that could change the complexion of the workplace.
Great. So your final thoughts, Tareef, as we close this out. I guess in terms of action, if somebody's interested in Thailand's happily.ai, can look at budaya.app also for those elsewhere in Malaysia and so on. What sort of advice would you impart as we close out this in terms of actions that the viewers can sort of take based on what we shared on AI and leveraging AI, and also in terms of leveraging your app, happily.ai?
Yeah, I mean, you could book a time with me on happily.ai. I think when you click a book a demo, it goes directly to me, so I'll be the first you talk to. But yeah, I think the conversation we should continue to have is how can we use AI to enhance how we work, and a lot of it is within the culture of the organization, is the makeup of its practices. And so I'm really interested in that. Anybody who wants to talk about those aspects of work, I would love to join that conversation. So I think that's what could be next.
So, every Tech Talk, we have a Tech Talk fire round, but I don't know whether we have time to do that. But I'm going to just take 1 or 2 questions, and you got about 20 seconds to answer them.
Okay.
We'll do a quick one, and then we'll cut off. We've had such an engaging conversation. But, if you could change something in the world, what would you change in 20 seconds?
I've realized that changing incentives are the most powerful things you could do in a system. So I would like to change how we incentivize people and how we incentivize companies, that we should incentivize kindness over just performance alone.
All right, fantastic. It's a little bit more than 20 seconds, but this one will be fast. What's your favorite non-tech related topic?
Wow, that's a hard one.
This one will always stump tech people.
Yeah, I spend so much time just doing work. I'm a sucker for a great TV show, just because I really like powerful narratives. So yeah, I think that's what concerns.
And maybe this question we'll close with this. What's your one business podcast, book, or whatever? I mean, it can be anything. It can be non-business, or what book podcast would you recommend aspiring entrepreneurs?
I mean, other than your podcast, Roshan, I will have to recommend anything by Adam Grant, because I think he makes the world of organizational culture and organizational psychology very accessible and very practical. So yeah, definitely recommend Adam Grant.
And his books are quite amazing. And we'll close. Last easy question: what's your favorite way to unwind?
I'll go back to the TV.
All right.
Escaping to a different world and learning from that world and reapplying it back to
fantastic.
my world.
Yeah. Tareef, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. We've been speaking to Tareef Jafferi from happily.ai, and it's been a pleasure having you on our show. Thank you so much. We'll be back next week, same time, same place, Tech Talk. And I think next week we have guy who works for used to work for the US Red Team, who's joining us. So we'll be talking to a guy called Data, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see you next week on Tech Talk Asia, and Tech Talk Friday. Sorry, and Tareef, thank you again. Appreciate your time and appreciate you being with us.
Thank you for
We'll
having
catch
me.
up with you. We'll catch up with everyone next week. See you guys on Tech Talk Friday.